Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us here at the Ministry of Information for our second press briefing this week. Earlier this week, I think it was on Sunday, if I recall correctly, we had the Minister for Sports join us with an update on the sports sector. This morning, we have with us the Minister responsible for Finance and a team from the Finance Ministry to give us a brief on something very significant that's going to happen here in Ghana this May, and which serves as an ignition to a broader recovery, of course, here in Ghana and across the continent. As you are aware, the world is looking to recover from a twin crises, COVID-19 and then the impact of what's going on in Europe currently. And to do that, partnerships are very important. One of the major partners of Africa is the African Development Bank. And at this time, as Ghana prepares to step up our recovery effort and to deepen our partnerships in that area, the African Development Bank Group Annual General Meetings 2022 is coming to Ghana. This morning, the Minister responsible for Finance is here to officially announce to the country these meetings, what they mean for Ghana and the rest of the continent, and how we expect to make the best of it. I want to acknowledge a few persons who are here with us as we get it underway. The Director, External Resource Mobilization and Economic Relations Division at the Ministry of Finance, Madame Yvonne Kwanzaa, is here with us. Yvonne, thank you. You haven't come to my ministry before, eh? Welcome, welcome, welcome. The Chief Director, Dr. Patrick Nomo, is here with us. Thank you for being with us this morning. The Coordinating Director of Operations, Madame Stella Williams, is here with us. Stella, thank you very much for being with us. We'll be joined shortly by the Honorable John Kuma, Deputy Minister for the sector. He's handling something on behalf of the Honorable Minister. He will join us shortly. And we have with us the Minister responsible for Finance, the Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. Please let's receive him with a big round of applause.
Good morning. Wow. Yeah, Kojo, this is a beautiful place. I really never been here, so I can see the use of your budget. Yeah, but really, thank you for taking time to join us for this. And as Kojo said, I think we have a pretty seminal event coming up with the Africa Development Bank. And there are many reasons that the reason why it is important for us, given the build-up of all of these events, as Minister said, from COVID to the Russian-Ukraine war. I think Kojo was a bit euphemistic in talking about events in Europe, but it's really an unfortunate war. So let me thank you, Kojo, for the opportunity for the Ministry and myself to be here and to inform and update our fellow Ghanaians on this important event, the hosting of the 2022 Annual General Meeting of the Africa Development Bank at Accra International Conference Center from May 23rd to the 27th. It is the first time Ghana will be hosting this event in person in our history after we signed on as founding member state on 14th August 1963 in Khartoum, Sudan, and attended the bank's inaugural board meeting in November 64 in Lagos, Nigeria. Indeed, we had a Ghanaian, Dr. Kwame Donkofojo Kantinka, as the president of this bank between 1976 and July 1979. But it's truly intriguing, to think that Nkrumah was one of the key founders of the OAU, and we've not had a meeting of the AFDB in Ghana, forever. And even more significant, we have not had an organ of the African Union in our country since the founding, until was a couple years ago when the AFCFTA came into force. And it's like, with all the work we did, so we had the political emancipation of the continent and set up this great institution, and we don't get any benefit. But then 60 years later, the next emancipation, of course, is economic and investment. And by divine whatever, it lands in our country. So patience and perseverance is important. John, welcome. Thank you. When you see people in white, they are coming from Ministry of Finance. Thanks a lot for making it. For me, I just see this honor of this small country as we are, literally launching the political emancipation of the continent, and now some 60 years later, heading the economic emancipation, which is really the new war, But for us, what is even more enduring is the president's then declaration of the National Cathedral. And the reason I say that is because I look at, life as, political emancipation, economic emancipation, and a spiritual uplift, so that you can keep the values and tenets of what represents your country. So that triangle is important, and it seems it's coming together at this junction. And that's exciting for me. So we look at now the AFDB having its annual meeting here, and as luck will have it, we had it last year, but it was virtual. And then the shareholders and governors decided that, we should continue and have the next one here, which will be physical. And so there we have it. The hosting is long overdue, but it's a great time because it's a time of significance that we have. So we'll host it, and the two main entities of the AFDB, as you know, Patrick, welcome, and that's the ADB itself and the Africa Development Fund for concession loans. So typically about 3,500 participants attend the AGM. Given the COVID issues, we expect it to be about a third of that in terms of delegates. And this year is also the 50th anniversary of the ADF. So it coincides, and it's also the 50th anniversary since the passing of our founding president, Nkrumah. So we have all these global issues. We have the 50th anniversary of the fund, the 50th anniversary of the passing of Dr. Nkrumah, and we have the AFCFTA headquartered here. So today, 41 African economies are severely exposed to at least one of three concurrent crises: rising food prices, rising energy prices, and tightening financial conditions. Finance ministers now call it, the dreaded 3 Fs of food, fuel, and financial conditions. And that is just rippled through all of Africa. Food prices easily about 34% higher, crude oil prices some 60% higher, global inflation has risen. We saw our numbers yesterday move to, I believe, 23.6% or so, and a good chunk of it being imported inflation. So we truly are at our wits' end on the continent as to how to address these issues. And the numbers of people who are impacted is quite scary. and we have to look at that. So the newly poor in Africa has increased by some 55 million, and approximately 35 million former jobs are at risk around the continent due to reduced demand, enforced lockdowns, and global supply chains, and the war. So this toxic mix of challenges persists even as the continent recovers, or we try to recover, from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. The spread and scope of these challenges require collective and coordinated action at the regional level if Africa is to overcome them. In the AFDB, we have a well-positioned institution with a convening power and a network of technical and financial resources to significantly contribute toward finding robust solutions to some of these intractable problems that we are experiencing. So the theme this time around is achieving climate resilience and a just energy transition for Africa. So the 2022 AGM is significant as it is the first physical meeting since 2019. Therefore, we must take advantage of this seminal AGM to advance discussions on building resilience, addressing financing gaps, and narrowing the continent's physical and digital infrastructure deficits. As a privileged host also of the AFCFTA, we are also providing an opportunity to advance the course of economic integration in response to some of these challenges during the annual general meeting. Indeed, on the sidelines of this meeting, we also have 30 indigenous industrialists, 5 fintechs showcase their services and products. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual general meeting will be attended by ministers for finance, governors of central banks, leaders of local and international finance and development organizations, captains of industry and civil society, and organizations from the 81 member states of AFDB made up of 54 regional and 27 non-regional members. So at this meeting, there will be a formal opening where President Nana Akufo-Addo will deliver the keynote address and closing ceremony, which will be web streamed and also televised. There will be a presidential dialogue on Africa development challenges and opportunities. The President has invited about 10 other heads of states to be here. They will be in 2 groups, really talking about the issues that are pertinent to the transformation of our continent. So that is going to be very exciting for us to see the minds and vision of our leaders. We'll also have 4 statutory sittings of the Board of Governors. Those are closed sessions, some 4 knowledge events in terms of building resilient digital economies for Africa, climate resistance in Africa's food systems, green jobs for youth and women, and the seminar on special drawing rights will also happen. Then we'll have an Africa Day event coinciding, as I mentioned, with both the 50th anniversary of the passing of Dr. Nkrumah and also the 50th anniversary of the ADF. But that will be a very exciting day with culture, speeches, youth, exhibitions, etc. So I believe that hosting this high-level event in Ghana will help convey our collective appreciation to the AFDB as a long-standing strategic partner of our country. Through an enduring partnership with the bank, Ghana has undertaken significant infrastructure developments, including the Pokwasi Interchange, Terminal 3, Awoshi-Pokwasi and Fufolso Solar Road, and then also the Savannah program in the north for agriculture. We've also made considerable progress in partnering with them in education, skill training, sanitation, and the modernization of agriculture in Ghana with the significant support of the AFD, including some solar systems, some TVET training, supply of fertilizers and seeds, and then transformation support to 100,000 SMEs in Ghana through the Rural Enterprise Project since '95. We're also thankful to AFDB for its support in establishing the new $800 to $1 billion development bank, which will officially be launched in June of next month. They provided $70 million of complementary financing to support that. So Ghanaians have a cause to take pride in and promote this enduring partnership with AFDB. We owe it to our forebears and ourselves to successfully host this important event for the continent. To this end, the local organizing committee, headed by Yvonne, has worked assiduously with officials of AFDB to deliver the key aspects of the AGM as outlined in an MOU that we signed with AFDB on November 8th, 2021. So I'm really happy to report that we've had 2 initial assessments which have gone very well. Just left a breakfast with Dr. Adesina and the diplomatic corps. He also paid a courtesy visit to our president yesterday, and I think we are 90% there of preparations, and it's going to be one of those moments for the continent in which we highlight the issues that are important to us and really ensure that AFDB begins to take its rightful role on the continent and among the leaders in the world of supporting financing of our continent. So some of the key issues that we will hope to achieve at the summit is how to push our non-regionals to acknowledge that the ADF, which is the concession financing, we should be able to go to the capital markets to leverage its 25 billion equity so that we can bring more resources to the continent. The reason why it's important, 2 reasons. One, when a country, African country, goes to the market, you end up getting an interest rate of at least 8%, whilst people like Greece will get about 2%. If we are able to use the ADF to issue bonds, they will get it also around the 2% and unlend it to us at a cheaper rate. So we need a collective lobbying effort to get countries to do that. But also significantly, apart from getting that resource, they are able to leverage it about 4 times. And so it increases, the supply of long-term funds for our development on the continent. So that's important for us, and we need to push for that. The other issue is also a recognition that donors and the multilaterals, the Bretton Woods, they cannot really meet the demands that Africa has. And the key is in our ability to assess pension fund money in the West. But because of the way in which ratings agencies rate Africa, it really becomes difficult for them to invest. How do we get around getting to these almost 145 trillion of money that is mostly underperforming to find an Africa stability mechanism which will then be able to draw or crowd in that type of capital which we need for our SDGs, for climate change, to recover also from the COVID experience. So that is the challenge. It's a good time for this AGM to happen down, and it could lead to some really important change in how the global financial architecture is tackled so that we can get the resources we need to be able to transform the continent. So Kojo, this is where we are at, and available for all questions.
Okay, sir. Yes. So, Minister, thank you. As Minister resumes his seat, we will be in a good position to take your questions. And as is customary, we'll take them in batches of about 4. Please keep them as straightforward as possible so that we can see what you are looking for and get your answers. Minister has explained the purpose of the annual meetings, the historic nature of Ghana's hosting of these meetings in 2022 and the kind of expected benefits that we have in mind, both for, may I say, the homeland or the motherland and the continent. So it's a good time for your questions, to take them now. Can I get the microphone? Yes, sir. Microphone is ready if you have questions. So we'll start from the back. Are there others? So I have two at the back. Let's start with the two at the back. Please introduce yourself and then let's hear your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Cooper and I'm from Reuters. And I would just like to know, given the challenges from ratings agencies and the difficulties in securing financing, after having attended the recent IMF and World Bank meetings, has your openness to seeking out financial assistance from the IMF changed at all? Thank you.
Yes, there's a lady at the back.
My name is Nancy Vokania from TV3. I'd want to find out from the Honorable Minister if Ghana is considering the World Bank's advice to set up a creditor committee to renegotiate with our creditors.
Sorry, can you speak up? If Ghana is considering the World Bank's advice to do what?
To set up a creditor committee to renegotiate and restructure our debt situation. And then also, I'd want to find out what effects the persistent undersubscription of T-bills is having on our revenue mobilization so far. And also, if it's allowed, the question on the e-levy deployment. There are challenges now with deductions and so on. We would want to know if, so far, the revenue numbers look good, and does it look like the collections from the e-levy will give us enough fiscal ease to do some of the things that we've planned to do with the e-levy?
Thank you, Nancy. Minister, just to recap, Cooper is asking whether there's a different position on a possible financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund following the spring meetings and the advocacy that you've been up on. Nancy is asking what's our disposition to a suggestion that Ghana sets up a creditor committee to renegotiate or restructure our debts. She's also asking whether the reports of some auction failures have any implications on government's liquidity position, and is further asking whether the early challenges of e-levy implementation will affect in any way our fiscal projections for this year. Those are the first two questions I have. Are there any other takers before I go to Minister for responses? You have a question? Yes, feel free. Microphone, please.
Yes, my name is John Awuni Kesben. According to some global cocoa marketing company statistics, 2020, the cocoa industry was valued around $12 billion US. But when you go to the chocolate industry, it is in excess. By 2024, it will be around $124 million. So this particular annual general meeting, will it be one of the things they will be discussing? Because we're looking at cocoa, which is one of Africa's biggest supplier. We only get few or some small amount of it as compared to the chocolate industry, which Africa don't process. Will it be one of the areas they will be considering in this annual general meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's straightforward and understandable. Minister, I want to invite you to the podium to respond to the first batch of questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So the first person was from, is it Cooper, or what's the name? Yeah, Cooper. Where are you? So I can see you. You know, all the white folks are just interested in us becoming, being in a program with the IMF. And I always wonder why, you know. So Cooper, why that question? And let's say there are two, I mean, we are members of the fund, is that correct? There are two major points of intervention that we have from the fund. One being the advice that we get because of the, phenomenal expertise that the fund has. And then secondly, these program interventions, which bring us some resources. I think if you see from the budget that we constructed for 2022 and the subsequent announcements that we have done, clearly the issue of Ghana having the capacity to think through the consolidation exercises and also discipline itself with regards to the 20-30% cuts, etc., that we have shown, clearly a direction that I guess even in a sense the fund may be hesitant to push any further with regards to that. So clearly, with regards to sort of philosophical alignment about realizing that we needed this type of consolidation, we have done that. Then we get to the issue of our debt level for the financing, which dovetails into the World Bank's, Nancy talked about the World Bank's advice on the creditor committee. And the question then becomes whether the fund would have the type of resources that will require to really inoculate a program for the debt. And that is a question that is hanging, whether they can. But we have committed, as you know, to not going back to the fund because, in terms of intervention of policy, we are right there, and the fund notes that we are completely in the right direction. And so the issue is validating the program that we have put in place, and then, in my view, supporting us to find alternative ways of financing or refinancing our debt, reprofiling it without needing to be with the fund. And I think there's general acknowledgement that should be thought of as the first port of call, and we are doing it. The issue of restructuring debt, it's a very complicated issue, especially with the private sector and the Eurobonds, etc. And we need to decide ourselves on what type of structure will be useful to us. We have essentially about 50-50 with regards to domestic and external debt. The domestic debt, of course, has interest rates about 3.5 times than what the foreign debt is. And then we look at the profile, and clearly the foreign debt in terms of impact really begins to hit in 2025 with regards to our Eurobonds, etc. So solving the domestic debt conundrum is what we should be looking at, and that is where we are putting our minds as to how best to do that. Auctions, which have been problematic in the past few auctions, I think it's stuff that we have to deal with. And of course, it gets complicated even more with the increase in interest rates. And we need to just confront that and see how we can reprofile that to give us fiscal space. So that's something that we are working on to manage that. We are, as a matter of fact, running a budget deficit, which essentially connotes that, our revenues are below our expenditure, and that's why the intervention of the e-levy was so important. We announced the budget, I guess, November 17th or so, and it wasn't until that miracle day of March 29th that we got through Parliament with that. I'm very confident that it opens a whole new vista for our tax handles and a way in which all Ghanaians would also be paying something. I don't know of any program which has technology involved that will not have teething problems. But certainly the cataclysmic, pronouncement by people on the other side is not happening. I think we pretty much have it under control as much as you can. We started on May 1st. We were blessed with that being a period of a holiday for 3-4 days. So we saw the issues and began to tackle them. Will there continue to be certain technical issues? There will be, but certainly not the Armageddon that was pronounced for us. I think we are a country moving really forward. You've discovered a tax handle which does two things. One, from 78 billion cedis of mobile money transfers to maybe almost 1 trillion last year. And therefore, you begin to see how e-commerce and technology becomes effective. And that will be good for the country. And then secondly, of course, the sense of unfairness that some 2.4 million people are paying because they're in the formal sector and nobody else is paying, bringing everybody else on board, as small as it will be. But we also were clear on the issue of regressive taxes, which says that you don't overtax the poor. And so the first 100 cedis was not being levied, and that is about 3,000 cedis a month in effect. We know our salaries are not that high. So truly, most of those that people advocate as regressive taxes are not affected at all. And if you have 200 cedis, I'm sure you can do it in 2 days, and therefore there will be a zero impact. So we are truly excited about this new tax handle to look at issues of curing, auction failures, increasing our revenue mobilization, getting technology, and gradually moving into an economy in which really, people just don't use cash because it's much easier to continue with technology. So I think it's an exciting period to having a structural solution to revenue mobilization in a way that we haven't had before. We are also, I guess, starting with the property taxes as a pilot to begin. And we'll be a nation in which we can easily double our revenue to GDP ratios from the 13-14%, to double that. So a pretty good time, but nobody likes to pay taxes, so it's always difficult. But I think we all begin to get used to it as we apply the use of the taxes for the citizenry to see. We should be launching the U-Start program, the 10 billion CD historic program, starting in June, and we'll be able to see immediately the deployment of those resources, to this teeming mass of some 11 million youth to get enterprise, employment, support for the youth, so that we become the entrepreneurial nation that we've advocated for. So these are, great times for the nation. We should be able to read the times as they are. And you come to these very difficult moments in your history, and then the genius of the Ghanaian rises up and will do it. So let us be confident about the future, but let us bed and share, all of us, so that we get to where we are purposed to be. Thank you.
So there was a final question about whether the meetings will address how to better appropriate value chains for Ghana, including, for example, the cocoa value chain, how to ensure that.
The cocoa value chain, that's true. Very important question, because, as you suggested, sort of the seed industry maybe about 12 billion, you said so. Between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, I mean, Ghana is usually 2, Cote d'Ivoire 3. So between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, maybe about 5 billion cedis of seed, which then goes to create an industry of actually somewhere around 140 billion, not 24 billion, when you look at all the things that cocoa is involved in. So, the reflex has been, okay, let's start some processing in our country, which we are doing. But the truth of the matter is that the first cut at processing does not really bring you a whole lot of money. It is when you move into the chocolate making. So I think we as a country needs to be a little bit clearer on that policy, because we were so over-enthusiastic about that those who want to process in the initial instance are even given a 20% discount, which means that, even selling the seeds could give us more money. So that has to be, relooked at, or else we scale up the value addition beyond just, sort of the first stage processing. Then you really be capturing. So I think that is the next move. But clearly between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, with our agreements that we have, I think we are all challenged to look at it differently. Important question, because Afri-Exim has also determined that trade in cocoa should be elevated, and therefore they are looking at purchasing, of some of the plants by Cadbury or whatever outside, so that we can link into that. So there's some ways to go, but the thinking is in the right direction, and we should be able to make more money from that than we are doing. I keep saying that people I graduated from at Yale who are in commodity trading have not seen a farm before. They make $1 million a year. And then my uncles, the farmers, of snake bites and cutlass wounds, just take whatever we take. So for me, the accusation is for us, the educated elite, how we have not been able to bridge, that gap between what the farmer gives as seed to the end product on the shelf, so that we can accrue or appropriate that resource into our country. So yes, watch that space, and we should get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, while I go for, I think, the final batch of questions, I can't help but recollect Obamacare, which is today revolutionized healthcare delivery in the US, and the initial technology glitches that the websites had. And it pales in comparison with the benefits that today millions of Americans are, appropriating. And then when Nancy asked about the revenue performance, my mind just went to the fact that it's past end of April. So I was wondering how many of us here have filed our tax returns. April 30th is the day that you have to file your tax returns. So please bear that in mind. Nana's hand is up. Nancy is up again. I have more hands. So I'll take it in 2 batches, okay? So maybe let me take this side first. Can I see the hands up here? So 1, 2, 3. Nancy, I'll come back to you 4 for this, and then I'll come back here. Gentlemen, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the next batch. So can we have the microphone, please? Yes, let's start with Nana.
Good morning, Honorable Minister. My name is Nana Poku from Daily Searchlight. I have 3 questions for you. 1, is the meeting going to consider introducing some mitigation measures, as it were, to cushion the masses in the face of these economic challenges on the continent? Secondly, is the government contemplating introducing new taxes to fill in the gaps, the revenue gaps, and the fiscal imbalance or shortfalls? And thirdly, what does the rising inflation in this country or in Ghana hold for us as a people? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Regarding the implementation...
Kindly introduce yourself to us.
my name is Salom Bobiji, the Finder newspaper.
Salom.
Yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding implementation of the e-levy and revenue mobilization, a friend who lives outside the jurisdiction wants to know if I have an active mobile line in Ghana, a Momo account in Ghana, but I live outside the jurisdiction, and I send money to someone in Ghana from where I live, will I be subject to the payment of the e-levy if I exceed the threshold?
Thank you. Salom, I'll hold that question for GRA. I told you GRA will be coming to do a detailed presentation on those ones. So I'll hold that question for GRA when they come. So please pardon me for putting it in the holding tray. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel Ijab, and I'm from GH1 TV. Now, Emmanuel.
Yeah,
the real question is, inflation is up. We are suffering a twin crisis by COVID and Russia and Ukraine war. But the real question for the Ghanaian consumer is the inconsistencies with the price hikes. Transport fares are up. You go to the market, people are increasing them. The real question is, should we have a regime where government controls by how much people decide to increase prices?
So some are asking whether we should go back to the days of price control. Minister, the revolutionary days of price control, and whether it worked or not. Nancy, should I come to you? Okay, so let's take Nancy.
So I want to rehash my question on the under-subscription of the Treasury bills. That wasn't answered, so if the Honourable Minister could do that.
Actually, the Minister spoke to the auction failures issue. It was the same one he spoke to on auction failures.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
My mistake. Right. So there's been an indication that the JAPA is being relisted on the Ghana Stock Exchange. If we could get an update on that and what Ghanaians stand to gain from that. And there were some salary cuts for some government officials and so on. Would want to know if we've been able to obtain some fiscal ease from that, because it looks like all the government workers are asking for increments in salaries. Are we able to do that at this time? And then, yeah, I think that for now.
Those are 3 questions already. Okay, so let me just rehash these questions, and then we'll get answers, and then I'll come for the final batch here when Minister is done. Nancy asked 3 questions. Is JAPA as a transaction being relisted? And I think while we are having that discussion, we must bear in mind the conversation between, or the difference between the monetization of mineral royalties and specific transactions that may be developed in pursuance of the monetization. I think JAPA was one specific transaction that was being developed in pursuance of the concept of monetization of mineral royalties. And you're asking whether JAPA as a transaction is back on the table. I'll get Minister to respond to that. You're also asking whether the salary cuts, and Nancy, with your permission, let me broaden that. Minister, the intervention measures that were mentioned by government, even broader, including the salary cuts, are they yielding any impact that from your desk you can begin to observe? And then Nancy is asking a 3rd question. What is government's position on the agitations for increased salaries? What is government's position on the agitation for increased salaries? Emmanuel was asking whether we can go back to the era of price controls because of how inflation with its various components is performing. And then Nana Poku also asked 3 questions. Will the annual meetings possibly discuss continent-wide cushioning measures as these global challenges appear to be escalating? Is the government of Ghana contemplating new revenue measures?
New taxes, not revenue measure. New taxes.
But taxes are part of.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Taxes are part of revenue measures. So is the government of Ghana contemplating new revenue measures, or maybe even specifically taxes? And then there's another question. What is your reading of how this escalating inflation? In fact, this morning, if you're watching CNN, they are talking about escalating gas, rent, food, and other prices in the U.S., in the UK, they are discussing what they call the cost of living crisis that is as a result of inflation. He's asking, what is your reading of the impact of the growing inflation on the everyday Ghanaian? And if I may have your permission to add to that, what is the government doing about it? Colleagues, have I captured your questions well? Sometimes I'm accused of changing your questions, but I hope I've captured them fairly. Minister, we're in your hands.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I wonder whether Kojo is on your side or my side. He frames the questions so succinctly you can't, you know. Yeah, but thank you. I mean, I think Nana, you asked a really crucial question, which really, in a sense, underpins, you know, all the questions that have come. And at the end of the day, it's lives and livelihoods and how we manage our way through. I think what is good is that at least the country is beginning to acknowledge that this is a global menace. At first, it was a pretense that, it's only Ghana and therefore, you know, but I think everybody is quite clear about that. And even the 23.6 inflation, maybe a little bit more than half of it is identified as imported inflation. But be that as it may, that's a reality. And what are you going to do about that? And then when you then follow up of a question which asks for new taxes, then I get a little jittery because, you know, you've asked the pertinent question at the beginning, how do I then bring new taxes, you know, to bear at this juncture when food taxation or inflation, you know, is a tax on everybody? And how do we go forward? Digitalization is going to be important so that I find everybody who ought to pay and is not paying, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and I have to get efficient in collecting that, you know. So that's a difficult. What can we do? I think really Cabinet was quite prescient about the budget that we had and the theme of building an entrepreneurial society is pretty clear. We're not even sure that these things were going to happen. So the 10 billion cedi intervention, where you are then going to have people create their own jobs, you know, and have work to do, is going to be important and enhance productivity towards this. Because imported inflation, what are you going to do about food, fuel, you know, and financing from out there? The question is whether you can get our people working, whether our people can be more productive, so that we move towards, you know, an environment in which lives and livelihoods are protected, but people are in control of their destiny. Because we just have to deal with a new world order, and the tail of these things are usually long. The COVID tail is long. Now the Ukraine war is also going to affect that. So yes, we need to find a means of bringing skills, technology, and appropriate financing. You know, and once again, I'll give it to the Cabinet for thinking through this whole intervention of a development bank, where, you know, the questions were, well, why another development bank? What is it going to do? Now we see what that is, $800 million of that, to be able to give long-term financing to various financial institutions so that credit will be made available. Co-join it with the Youth Start program, which will launch in June, and you begin to see, I guess, new energy, a sense of being able to chart your own future and burden share to go forward. It's not going to be easy, but really you are building a much more resilient society that will fight through this also. So that's how I look at it in general. Implementation of the mobile money, Minister said GRA will be here for that. But really, if you're foreigner or foreign-based and you are sending money to your people in Ghana, my jurisdiction does not get there, so there's no way I can tax you or levy you from that side. Yeah. Then I think Emmanuel talked about inflation being up and the price controls. So where's Emmanuel? Yeah. I think for me what is interesting is that if you are able to ask a question of the magnitude of price control, then you should have investigated what it did or did not do for our economy. And if you definitely believe that it was good for us, then I'll take the question. But if you have researched it, I'm sure you'd have dropped the question. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's why we all go to school, so we can research. So, Emmanuel, price controls are very difficult things. I think it completely derailed Nkrumah's policy. It led to favoritism, because you have to come to my office for a chit, and this and that. And we want to get rid of all of that sort of control of your life, and then somebody gets to import and doesn't import, and you are unleashing something that you may not want to experience again. So how do we get through this believing that if we're able to find resources for the Ghanaian to then do their work, that will then increase the productivity in our system for us to go there. Or as government is in your life everywhere, and truly, that's not what you need. Yeah. So let's see how we can work around that. Nancy, maybe talking about EJAPA. I mean, my firm philosophical belief really is that the capital markets are meant for something that will lead us to equity resources, and we are not leveraging on it. And therefore, the question, it's not a question of whether monetization of mineral royalties or listing of the company is bad or good. It is good because that is how you raise resources. The question is the process of doing that. If we have a problem with the process, let's articulate it, let's cure it, but let's not drop, something that will be good for us and reduce our debt exposure. So those are two very different questions. How best to do it, as opposed to don't do it. And so my mind is still there. I know the President has mentioned something about that, going through the AG and Parliament again to do that. But it's not something that I think is an asset to the country that one needs to drop. You need to examine all your equity and debt positions and make the best choice for the country, not a fleeting instances. We would never have done senior high school if we listened to other people. That's 400,000 lives now, that have a chance to do something. We would have stopped short at e-levy because of the noise, and suddenly we have a tax handle that will be phenomenally important for the country. So we need to look at that. I think with regards to, once again, the results of the consolidation and the announcements about travel and reduction in salaries and all of that, the controller will be giving us a report to see. But it's really early days yet. But I think what was significant was really the issue of sacrifice and recognition by leadership that these are difficult times and we should join. Sometimes it's not a quantum, but it's exercising a sense that you are au fait with what is happening with your people and you are joining in it to make sure that you're all burden sharing.